Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
going to give you 6 minutes.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ham, has the Biden administration done anything right?
On the issue of schools, they've
Well,
said
I'm saying in general.
in general.
I mean, 7 out of 10 Americans think the country, I don't know if I've ever seen wrong track numbers this high. 7 out of 10 of our fellow citizens think the
mean,
country's on the wrong track.
They're pretty bad, which is one of the reasons I speak about this issue and bring the political part of it to bear, because great confidence has been lost in this particular demographic with really good reason.
Yep.
And in order to improve one's political fortunes, one needs to recognize that that happened.
Now, you said you were a mom with, I think, 2 children, is that right?
3 kids.
3 kids, mom with 3 kids. Everything costs more? Everything costs more today?
Yes, that's correct.
Clothes cost more for your kids, food costs more, gas to take them to, I assume, soccer practice, band practice, whatever your kids are involved with. That probably costs more too, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and if your mom who needs baby formula, that costs more too, if you can even find it. I mean, everything costs more, is that right?
Yes, if you can find it, which is another grave issue for many moms. And I would say on the issue of economic issues and inflation, just like with the school stuff, the reason I care about these things is because if it is hurting me, I know that it is hurting other people far more, because I have some amazing things in my employment. I have some flexibility. I don't have some of the things that you guys have mentioned, but I have some flexibility. I have abilities to work around this. I had the ability to teach my kids at home. I opened up my home to other people's families who did not have that ability. Because I knew that these trends were hurting other people who did not have the resources I had far worse than they were hurting me. And I deeply want those to be acknowledged and dealt with before we move to the solution, because the problem must be acknowledged before we move to the solution.
Well said. And let's talk about some of those people who were directly impacted in a much worse way than you. Everything costs more today. They kept your kids out of school, I think you said for a year, but for more than 6 million students in the country, mostly concentrated in America's bluest metro areas, I mean from your testimony, they were deprived of in-person instruction for more than a year. They got the worst of it, but some 30% of American students missed 4 months. That's another 21 million kids missed 30% or more of their education. So everything costs more. They kept your kids out of school. And here's the thing that gets me. If you were a mom who showed up at a school board meeting to speak out against some of the things that were being done to your son or daughter, you might have been targeted by the Justice Department. I mean, I think you mentioned in your opening testimony the election in Virginia, Mr. Youngkin. It was a huge issue last fall. But I've never seen anything like this. We had whistleblowers come forward. Over 24 cases where this threat tag designation that Mr. Garland put in place, this apparatus and process he put in place. So they keep your kids out of school. Everything now costs more for a mom, for a dad. And if you go show up at a school board meeting to speak out against some of the things they're doing with your kids' education, oh my goodness, you may get investigated by the FBI. Such a deal for the tax-paying moms of this country.
Yeah, it's a problem because, and again, the reason I talk about this as often as I do is because a lot of families were hurt who have fewer resources than I do. And when they had the temerity to go before their public servants and ask for the public good to which they are entitled and for which they paid the same amount of taxes, even when it did not exist, they were pilloried and in fact sometimes targeted by federal law enforcement, which is a very, very big deal.
Now, Ms. Ham, you're a journalist, right?
Yes, I am.
And who do you work for?
CNN.
You work for CNN.
And I freelance write various other places. I've written for The Atlantic and...
So I just want to walk you through real quick, because I've never seen anything like this in my life. September 29th of last year, the National School Board Association sends a letter to the Biden administration saying use domestic terrorism acts and laws and statutes, the Patriot Act, to go after moms and dads. 5 days later, the Attorney General of the United States issues a memorandum where he actually puts in place a process, an apparatus to do just that. He sets up what he called a dedicated line of threat communication, what I would call a snitch line, so people could snitch on their fellow citizens who were showing up at these school board meetings. And then 16 days after that, now he sends that memorandum, by the way, to every U.S. attorney in the country. And then 16 days later, the FBI sends out an email to FBI agents around the nation. And as I said, we learned from whistleblowers that they use that apparatus to go after moms and dads. So from September 29th to October 20th, they put this in place. First thing I always say is I've never seen the federal government move that fast on anything. But when it comes to chilling moms and dads' speech, oh my goodness, they could operate at record speed. That is frightening. And as a journalist, I would think you think, and as a mom, you would say the same. Is that correct?
Yes, and by the way, the sort of exodus from the National School Board Association by local school boards shows, or in some state school boards, shows that
State of Ohio got out of it.
yes, shows that this was a misstep, and it became very public, and it is a betrayal of parents who have the right to speak to their public servants, and by the way, were barred from doing so for much of the pandemic because they were not allowed to be in person, just like their children were not allowed to be in person. And I also, as a free speech enthusiast, would love for parents who disagree with me, to speak.
Sure.
Vociferously
That's called America. That's
at
called the
all
First
of these
Amendment.
meetings as
Yeah.
well. So look, it's a problem. I think it's, again, goes to the trust problem. And one of the reasons that parents will look with a highly skeptical eye on the next solution coming down the pike for them is because this very basic service was taken away from them.
Yep.
And it was taken away from them in such a way that it was very hard to address. They were left with, as you guys note, very few safety nets in some cases. And they remain rightly skeptical that their local government or their federal government in some cases is going to be able to step in and solve these problems. So I think it's very important to look to the future, and one of the things we need to recognize is that in the present, many of America's metro area schools remain unstable for the very women we're talking about,
Yep.
because their children have to quarantine for 10 days because they saw a person at a soccer field that
I'm
had
out of
COVID.
time, but I just want to get one more question if I could, Ms. Ham. Do you support school choice?
I do.
God bless you, I do too. I don't think Americans should vote for any candidate for any office if they're not in favor of letting moms and dads decide where their son or daughter is going to get the best education. That is so fundamental. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you, Ms. Ham.
Thanks, gentlemen, for yielding back. Just keep on living. You see how fast the government can work.